it's so different, but it's also really nice because I'm learning about my heritage in a way as well. And I'm calling up my grandma and going, do you know about this? Or can you tell me, do you remember this? Or how would you have done this? Or can you show me how to do this? Whereas before I was cooking what I had been taught or what was in trend, or even, I hate to admit it, but to try to get an award.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. The pandemic has turned many lives upside down. It's forced everyone to rethink, adapt, and alter their careers to survive or benefit from new opportunities. But what if this massive disruption in our lives creates new opportunities that are a benefit to the community and better for a work-life balance? Emma McCaskill is the chef in residence at Chefs on Wheels in Adelaide. Emma, how are you going?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for joining us. You've had quite a year. You opened a new restaurant, left the restaurant, and now you're in a business that started because of the pandemic. What's it been like?
It's been hectic, to say the least. I don't know where to start. So I was at Spark at the Whitmore in Adelaide, and this is earlier in March. I was and am no longer working at Spark at the Whitmore, and we were sensing what was happening outside of Adelaide, and we made the decision to close the week prior, before restrictions, to build on a takeaway model, launching takeaway on the weekend. And I remember sitting in the first meeting with the management team just feeling so upset about closing the restaurant. And I remember saying to them, I actually tried to resist closing. And I remember saying to them, guys, don't you think we're overreacting here? Because at that stage, no other restaurants around us were taking the same route. It really quickly dawned on me that this was something much bigger than the restaurant. And then that same weekend, the government announced all venues were takeaway only. So the shift to do takeaway at that time was really exhausting for me, because all of my energy and focus was tunneled into getting the restaurant launch, which we only did the month prior. It was just hectic. And shortly after all of this went down, I get a call from my friend Paul Baker, who was running Botanic Gardens restaurant, and he spoke about a concept which actually his wife came up with, Annabelle, and it was called Chefs on Wheels. And I just jumped on board straight away. I just wanted to help in any way I could, and it was really good timing, because it involved a group of friends and like-minded chefs around Adelaide, and it enabled us to cook from our restaurants through this program, and then it got distributed to people's homes. And it was actually strange, because I got to a point in a few months after that where I actually decided to leave a secure job at Spark and then go out on my own as a chef in residence and cook through Chefs on Wheels, which is really risky at that period of time. And a lot of people were saying to me, are you sure you're doing the right thing? And, is it really the best time to be leaving a secure job? But it actually would have left me more vulnerable staying in the job rather than making the move. It happened.
Before we go in depth into sort of the move you have made to Chefs on Wheels, let's go back to Spark at the Whitmore, because you had, as you were saying, put so much energy into the launch. And I don't want to scare you or anything, but I actually was headed your way to review it when I was a restaurant critic. But so those plans got altered as well. And you do have to put in a lot of energy to open a new venue and then to be thrown into this takeaway model. How did that affect the sort of food that you were planning for the restaurant and then had to do for takeaway?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I pretty much initially just, so basically in the hotel, we had the restaurant downstairs, which was a separate kind of area, and then the rest of the hotel was like a casual pub menu. It's a 636 capacity venue, so it's quite large. Yeah, so there was 2 separate menus. There was the restaurant menu and then the pub menu. And what I tried to do is I tried to merge dishes from both menus that I thought would travel well, and we tested it out on friends and family over that weekend, and we just rolled out the old menu and what we had left in the fridges, and then what I actually decided to do, I think it was like the next week or 2 after, is I actually started exploring more Indian food. That's my heritage. My grandparents are Anglo-Indian. And we started making like lots of dal and different curries, and it ended up being the right food for that offering at that period of time. So yeah, I ended up going Indian. Yeah, so and then we had like just a window at the side of the hotel which we opened up for coffee, and every morning we were making donuts and some small pastries, and on top of that doing produce boxes with like cookie dough and muesli and hand-rolled pasta, which was a nightmare. It sounded a good idea at the time, but it was pretty hectic when we sold a lot of boxes. So yeah, I was just trying to come up with anything and anything just to keep ourselves busy, really. Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier that Paul and Annabelle contacted you about contributing to the Chefs on Wheels. And I know that they had a purpose-built facility, which is a part of her business, to create meals, but he also reached out to chefs like yourself. Were you producing meals in the restaurant at the Whitmore for Chefs on Wheels to go out?
Yeah, so I was cooking from Spark, and I tried to do similar dishes that through Chefs on Wheels that we were doing from the takeaway menu. So again, a lot of curries and vegetable-based dishes, and then they would pick it up, take it back to the commercial kitchen and distribute it through there. So,
What was trade like for Spark at the Whitmore previous to you leaving? You know, the industry had opened up again, and how was trade going?
It dropped significantly. It was certainly not the same as when it was open, but it was. We weren't trying to make money. We were just trying to pay suppliers and keep everyone there employed. So, yeah, we certainly weren't comparing it to what it was like being open. But, yeah, it was enough. It really made me admire businesses actually that do takeaway as their business, and just how much work is involved, especially with logistics. Like, an order comes in and you have to time it to get to that suburb with that driver amongst all the other orders. I think it's quite a big job for not that much return. So, yeah, it made me realise.
You mentioned earlier that most people were telling you that you were crazy for leaving a stable job to do another role during the pandemic. What went through your mind at that time to make you leave your job and take on the chef in residence role?
I think I just trusted my instinct at the time. I had probably 2 or 3 weeks where like the final 2 or 3 weeks, I really was, ringing around trusted friends and mentors and talking it through with them. And I was getting a bit of mixed feedback, but the end decision was just really gut instinct. And even after I had made the decision, I thought, shit, am I doing the right thing here? Because it's, I had a secure job in a business that was pretty busy and stable. And me leaving it and taking on something like this was a huge gamble and a huge risk. But yeah, it's definitely felt like the right thing to do. And I think that staying there, it would have may have left me a bit more open to being vulnerable later on down the track with what's going on in the industry. So,
well, yeah, Chefs on Wheels is a pretty fascinating company. You got two of Adelaide's and Australia's best chefs no longer in their restaurants that they were in a couple of months ago, involved in a brand new business that's feeding people in their homes restaurant quality meals. What's the challenges and differences in this role compared to running a restaurant?
it's just so different. Like, I mean, we're cooking from a commercial kitchen through a system that's built through Shopify rather than cooking from an openly trading restaurant. I certainly would never have imagined I would be doing this in a million years. But apparently it's a thing and a privilege. But no, it's, it's just Paul and I in the kitchen. We don't have that many staff. We are like it's a decent setup there. It's it's from an online ordering system. There's no waiters, there's no front of house, there's no customers that we see as such. It's all either picked up from the shop front or delivered to people's houses. There's no service, so it's you're not trying to race to get ready at 11:30 before lunch or 5:30 before dinner to set up your section and do briefing. We're just cooking, and we're just cooking really. So it's quite refreshing.
What's the life work balance now that you're not doing the sort of the night services, and you don't have that pressure of that deadline of the midday and the 6 o'clock?
I mean, we've still got pressures, but they're just different pressures. Like, we still have to. There is the pressure of the business to like we're running a business at the end of the day, so there's always pressures from that. But I do have a little bit more time to myself, especially through the nights. We're still working really hard. I just think that's ingrained in, I think that's just our personalities, really. We're not the sort of people that it's just us. We just work hard. But yeah, it's certainly in a weird way. It's a nice feeling because I know that it's all on me. Some people would not like that pressure, but I feel like it's in my control. It's my own destiny. So I'm actually quite enjoying it, if that makes sense.
What's some of the dishes that you're doing and that are regulars on that menu that you may not have done in the restaurant?
Well, my background is kind of French Japanese, and so on my menu I'm doing like my grandma's dal. There's a pork vindaloo, which is it's like a traditional recipe. There is like an epic 2-day process butter chicken, which I certainly would not ever have put on the menu at McGill Estate or, it's so different, but it's also really nice because I'm learning about my heritage in a way as well. And I'm calling up my grandma and going, do you know about this? Or can you tell me, do you remember this? Or how would you have done this? Or can you show me how to do this? Whereas before I was cooking what I had been taught or what was in trend, or even, I hate to admit it, but to try to get an award. But this time I'm cooking from the heart and what I want to learn about, and it's food that I would want to eat at home with my family. So it's very different. It's just cooking.
Coming up after the break, Emma tells us what drew her to the industry and the moment she fell in love with cooking.
There were all these things that I had never seen before, like ducks hanging in the cool room and oysters in shot glasses with burnt sake and mirin and Szechuan pepper with bread, and I was just like, oh my God, there's so much that I don't know.
I was cutting off the hocks and I was just like, these are stunning. The marbling and the texture and the colour was just, it gets you excited to use and cook with those products because it looks so good.
The Crackling is the latest podcast from Deep in the Weeds, where we take you behind the scenes into the kitchens of Australia's best chefs.
If you do the kind of double cook with the spiking, it's crunchy, but like honeycomb almost, like glass, yeah.
And onto the farms of our nation's best producers.
Somebody came along and said, well, there's this opportunity back in Victoria and it was pig farming. That's sort of how we got into it, and it's been fantastic.
The stories, the passion, the produce.
It was a real life-changing moment for me to see, the respect of an animal that is so deep and such a part of a culture.
The Crackling, a Deep in the Weeds production in partnership with Porkstar. Listen and subscribe to The Crackling now on your favourite podcast app. What drew you to the industry in the first place?
I was fortunately always surrounded by food at home, Indian food, but I didn't get into cooking because of that. I was actually a rat bag as a teenager, and I went to 5 high schools before the age of 16. But I managed to not get expelled from any of them, luckily. And I just needed to get into something. I am naturally a very busy person, and I took up a cookery course at the local TAFE here. And then I ended up enjoying it, And then just before I turned 18, I moved to Melbourne, and I got out the Age Good Food Guide. I think it was 2003 or 2004. And I just looked up restaurants and applied anywhere. And I ended up getting a trial at Ezard with Teague Ezard, and I got offered an apprenticeship, and it was really there when I started to fall in love with cooking. Just being surrounded by people that were driven and feeling a part of this family in the restaurant, and just the busyness of the restaurant. And there were all these things that I had never seen before, like ducks hanging in the cool room and oysters in shot glasses with burnt sake and mirin and Szechuan pepper with bread. And I was just like, oh my God, there's so much that I don't know. And that's when I fell in love with learning about wanting to learn and grow in cooking and the hospitality industry. So, yeah.
Well, from Ezard, that led you to some pretty extraordinary restaurants, Narasawa, Satbane's, Tetsuya's, and obviously Penfolds, McGill Estate as well. What's been some of the highlights along the years with those restaurants for you?
Oh, there's so many. I think in a way, like I kind of felt like, well, I grew up in them in a way. I spent 4 years at Ezard, and that was very much all I knew about cooking. And I just remember on a holiday I had a 1 week holiday, and I did a trial at Tetsuya's on my holiday, and I ended up getting the job. And Darren Robertson was the chef de cuisine then, and Luke Powell was the sous chef. And Phil Wood was the sous chef, but he was working at French Laundry at the time. And I just remember feeling like, oh my God, I'm so out of my league here. Like the caliber of people in the kitchen, and Clayton Wells was on the trout section as a chef de partie, and I have so many fond memories, but just being in kitchens in that era with people that were so driven was inspiring in itself to want to be a chef. So, yeah.
You mentioned earlier that about you didn't want to be vulnerable moving forward, being in a restaurant, and that was a part of your move to Chefs on Wheels. How do you see the restaurant industry moving forward, given what it's just been through?
It's hard to say. It's not what it was before. It's been affected for sure. I look at what's happening in Melbourne, and I just feel so sad about what's happening in the hospitality industry there, especially for some of my friends that have restaurants that are really struggling, especially with their staff. I think that, it's pretty brutal what's happened. But I think out of it, I think there will be a new form of dining, which will be really interesting to see what's invented out of it. And we kind of, even though it's shit to say, we kind of needed it to happen to reinvent it. So,
What's this period of time been like for you personally? You mentioned that your style of cooking has changed. It's no longer for all those various reasons that you listed, and you're just cooking. But has this experience changed you?
Yes, I think I have kind of just stopped cared about what people think of me or what I do. I'm not guided by doing things because someone said to do them, or because it's going, like I said before, going to get an award or it's in trend. I'm just doing what feels right. So I think I've stopped caring in a good way. And I've certainly gained a bit more confidence in myself to, I've learned how resilient I am, actually. And I've learned a lot actually in this situation. So,
well, the Chefs on Wheels business is pretty extraordinary to come out of some pretty tough circumstances, and with you and Paul in the kitchen. What can people expect moving forward from Chefs on Wheels?
that's a good question. We are going to just continue cooking delicious food and people enjoying it in their homes. We've got some new projects happening. Like we bought a secondhand laminator, so we're going to start making our own pastry, like puff pastry and rotis through the laminator. Which is actually huge because we feed a lot of people per week. It's not a small restaurant; it's quite a big operation, we'd just continue to cook from the heart, really, and support local producers and support the other chefs that are involved in the program.
We spoke to Paul earlier in the season. What is the scale of the business now? How many meals are you doing a week?
Oh, I don't even know. I think we're probably cooking for about 600 or 700 people a week. I'm not sure. I have to get the numbers. But we were a little bit concerned that things would drop off when venues reopened, but it didn't drop off. There's definitely a market here for it. There's a market for people that want to have deliciously cooked food at home that's at an affordable price. So it hasn't dropped off at all. It's just kept growing.
As someone who was a self-confessed ratbag during their teens, as you mentioned, and someone who you also said that these circumstances have changed you, and you no longer sort of care what people think, and sort of it's about doing what feels right for you. What sort of advice would you give for someone who is that sort of young ratbag just started in the industry?
Just stick at it. I think just be persistent. Really, if you want to cook, apply all of your energy into it and just stick at it. There'll be times where, especially in the early days, for me, I wanted to give up and try something else, but it was just really persisting at it and just be open and keen to learn, especially when you're starting out. It's okay to not know, and that's when you learn the most, is being open to learning. So if you fuck up, it's just a part of the process. So just keep at it and keep being persistent at it. So,
well, that's some great advice. And I'm really fascinated about your Indian heritage, and it's a cuisine that I love, and I love cooking. But is there any sort of secrets to cooking great Indian food, or do you have a dish that you just love to do from your heritage?
Well, I've just started to... Oh, there's so many. I love the desserts. They're so sweet, though. I love all the different types of flatbreads and the roti breads and the chapatis and the puris and the different types of flours and lentils that are used in the breads and the fermentation process of making them. I think people have, well, I certainly did cooking earlier on. I think people have this perception of Indian food being easy, and it's just chuck it in a pot and it's like a slow braise thing. But it's really, really complex, and each spice has a different job to do in a curry. And it's really about balance and cooking them out properly and how much of them you use, and marinating things properly. And it's really complex. Just as complex as any other cuisine. So that's what I'm learning now is I wish I could go to India right now. I was supposed to go this year and then this happened, but yeah, I can't wait to get there. So.
Well, Emma, what a bloody extraordinary year you've had, opening a new restaurant and then doing something that you never thought you would, but getting so much out of it. It's absolutely extraordinary. And we really loved having you on Deep in the Weeds. Keep in touch and good luck with Chefs on Wheels. It sounds pretty amazing for people in Adelaide. I wish I was there for that. Keep in touch and thanks for talking to us.
Thanks, Huck. Thank you for including me.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we share the stories of Australia's hospo community, suppliers and producers in search of hope during this pandemic. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.